We end up in the water with just the tip of the boat sticking up. Floated the boat to the surface. Wally Galley, live up in Port Hedland in Western Australia, the owner of GT Diving, have a free dive spearfishing shop. It's important for me to let everybody in on what happened, because my whole life I've spent on the ocean, and I wouldn't say I'm complacent, but an incident happened that you could never have expected to happen. And with all the planning and preparation and all the experience and knowledge, it's so quick and something goes wrong. And luckily for us, it didn't cost anybody their life. We planned to go to Bedard Island on a spearfishing trip, which is 100 kilometers from our boat ramp by ocean, and you go up probably in an easterly direction. That time of the year there was a lot of Spanish mackerel around, so it was a good time to go there. The neap tide was in our favor, so we planned to leave in the afternoon, camp on the island, and then spear the next day. But that's not what happened. We got to the island and realized that the tide is out a little bit too far, so we couldn't get the boat close enough to the island to offload our camping gear, which was just essentially a bit of cooking equipment and a swag each. Nothing special, but we couldn't get onto the island, so we had to go to plan B, which was camp up on the boat. So we just went a little bit off the island, maybe 2 kilometers, threw the anchor in. What we had done during the night was throw a second anchor out the back of the boat, just to try and keep it more from swinging around. Obviously with the tide changing and that and a bit of wind, the boat was a bit uncomfortable to sleep on, so we secured it with a second anchor. In hindsight, not a good idea. So we found out, pulled out all our gas cookers and everything. We rearranged all the equipment on the deck so we could cook up and have a nice warm meal. And around about 8:30 everybody had fallen asleep, no problem at all. And I would probably say 4:30 in the morning, got woken up by James, who's one of our mates with us, shouting, "Wally, your boat's flooding." And at that point, when I actually came to my senses, the boat was already tipped up at about a 30 to 40 degree angle, and there wasn't much we could do about it at that point. What happened next happened very, very quickly. We end up in the water with just the tip of the boat sticking up. At that point, I knew I had to find my EPIRB in a hurry, which was in the back hatch, which is now on a 5-meter trail craft. It's 4.5 meters underwater. Try to hold my breath and get down to it, but my adrenaline was running so hard I could not hold my breath for 10 seconds, obviously with a bit of panic and fright happening at the same time. Then I controlled myself a little bit longer, had another go down, and at that point the anchor rope had all come out of the anchor well, and I swam into a net of anchor rope back to the surface. And on the third attempt I managed to get down, grab the EPIRB out of the box at the back, and I still had the sense to close the lid with the latch. Got to the top, and I said to Marco, who's the third member friend of ours, I said to Marco, "How do you switch these things on?" And he was sitting on the very tip of the boat, and I had about 1/2 meter of boat left sticking out, and he fiddled, and eventually the light, and on the second time it flashed, you heard like a whooshing sound, and it was boat gone, and it was deathly quiet. So then I said to Marco and James, "Get rid of all your excess clothing," because we had tracksuits on, and so make sure that we can swim. And luckily for us, Bedard Island has got a lighthouse on it, So I just said to them, aim at the light and just swim. Don't panic, just swim towards the light, which we started doing. And in about 5 or 6 minutes into the swim, Marco started telling me that he's not going to be able to make it, and he was really hyped up, like really panicking, couldn't talk properly. And I said to him, Marco, what is the problem? He said to me, Wally, I can't swim that well. And I said to him, Marco, now's not a good time to tell me that. We don't have another choice. We have to swim. So I let him hang on to my left shoulder and try to frog swim back to the shore. I shouted to James, are you okay? And James said, yep, just swim, just swim. And about half an hour later, I heard James shouting, Wally, I've got a cramp in my leg. And that's when I thought, there we go. He's not going to make it to the shore. I'm going to have to explain to his wife and his mum what's happened. But put my focus back on trying to get Marco to the shore probably helped calm me down. And we slowly making progress, and I could see the lighthouse light was getting higher and higher, which was telling me we were getting closer and closer to the shore. And then after a little bit I realized that the light was getting lower and lower, and the current had grabbed us, and we were on our way around the side of the island. And I started then thinking that maybe we're not going to make it. 2.5 hours swimming. In that point, the sun started coming up. It was about 6:30ish. It was just light enough, and I could look in the water, and when I could see the bottom, that to me said that I would be able to make it. So I got all my strength together and got Marco and myself to the coral shelf, which presented another problem. We then had to sort of crawl and drag ourselves over the water, which the current was running out. It wasn't too hard, but cutting your hands and knees, scratching over the coral, until we eventually made it to the beach, which was a massive relief. And when we actually got to the beach, a little baby albatross bird, a little chick, was sitting on the edge of the sandbank, and it panicked when it saw us stand up, and it rolled down towards us. So I got up, grabbed the little bird and helped it and put it back on top of the bag. And Marco said to me, you've just saved my life, and now you've gone and saved this little bird's life. My words to him was, I know that little bird can't fly, and if we stuck here for a few days, at least we know we can eat something. And at that point I looked at the lighthouse, and I walked towards the lighthouse to try and see if I could see any bit of my boat, or even if we could see James. And halfway there, James popped up on the edge of the reef, and that was a massive relief. And when he had actually made it too, he would have been half an hour behind us, would have given him a 3-hour swim. And we looked around, and in the distance we could see a little shiny, silver shiny thing coming towards us. And at that point it didn't really make sense what it was, until we heard the sound and then realized there was a helicopter on its way. When we activated the EPIRB, I tied the string around my wrist, and I swam, towed it all the way to the shore, and then we just put it on the beach. When it went off, my wife got a phone call, and they asked her, where's Wally? Where's Wally? Anyway, she told them that I was at Bedard Island, and then they knew it definitely was my EPIRB, obviously registered to me. And they said to her the EPIRB was moving. They didn't realize that I tied it onto me. But anyway, when the helicopter arrived, he flew straight over the top of us and went out to sea in a big circle, and he was flying around, and then he came back to the island and flew around again. And I thought to myself, what are the chances he's not here for us? He's here for some whatever other business. So I grabbed a piece of wood on the beach, and I wrote help in the sand in big letters. And then he came over, hovered on top of us for a bit, and then he landed. And the co-pilot was actually someone that I know or knew at the time, jumped out and he said to me, "Wally, what's going on?" And I explained to him that my boat had sank and whatever, and he said, "We went out where the EPIRB was activated. That was the mark that they went to. They were actually looking for a boat." Realizing then the EPIRB was moving, they must have thought that the boat was still moving to the shore, not realizing that the boat had actually sank. So anyway, we negotiated how we were going to fly back to Port Hedland. So we let Marco get on the helicopter first, because we thought he needed the most help the quickest. He was still in a bit of shock, and then the pilot wasn't sure if he was going to come back. He said to us, "If I'm not back in an hour and a half, you'd have to wait out for a rescue boat." But he had dropped Marco off and decided that he would make it back, and he came back and picked up myself and James up, and we flew back and landed at the Port Hedland airport. And as we got out the helicopter, we were greeted by an ambulance and the police, and that immediately started the recovery process of trying to find my boat and get it back home. So we borrowed some airbags from some commercial diving friends, and we borrowed a 3-inch water pump run off a Honda power plant, and we snuck out there the next day. Luckily for us, the GPS coordinate was quite accurate to within 30 meters. I hung off the back of Rob's boat with borrowed goggles, because all my diving gear had disappeared with the sinking, and I could then, when he towed me over the mark, I saw my boat straight away, put on a float with a big 1-inch rope, and we had to go back to Hedland. So next morning we went out there. This time it's a 25-meter fishing boat, and luckily it's got a higher jib on the hydraulic crane on the one end of it. So we did the same thing. We dived again, floated the boat to the surface with the airbags. Then we grabbed the front of the boat with the crane and lifted the front of the boat out the water. Once the gunnels were above the water line, we put the 3-inch Honda water pump suction pipe in there, shot out the water, and we drained as much water as we could out of it, and then just towed it back to Port Hedland. At that point, we still hadn't found a reason for the boat to have flooded. We didn't find a crack in it. We had the boat upside down. We filled it up with fresh water from a garden hose. It's still a mystery to me then what exactly caused the boat to sink. The bilge pump worked. Everything that I did in my favor to make sure we had a safe trip was done to a T. Still cannot explain how that amount of water got into it and sank the boat. To wrap it up, from what I've learned and the experience that I got out of it, is go over your equipment, make sure it's 100% in working order, double check, don't be complacent, make sure you know that people know where you're going. Worst case scenario, if you have to be in the water for a night, that you would be found the next day. Make sure your EPIRB is registered, because no matter how much preparation you do, there's some little thing that will go wrong and can turn into a major catastrophe. If you like this content, enjoyed the video, like and share it. If ever you come to Port Hedland, like to see you drop by my spearfishing shop. We sell spear guns with a full dive kit, and go and spear and enjoy yourself. Look forward to seeing you.